Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Or good afternoon, I believe. I'm Andrew Seeley. I'm Executive Vice President of the Woodrow Wilson Center. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of Jane Harmon, the President of the Wilson Center, who's traveling today, as well as Mike Van Deusen, who you'll hear from in a moment, who was our longtime Executive Vice President and now Senior Advisor Jane Harmon, who will be moderating today's session. We are proud once again to host the Czech and Slovak Freedom Lecture, which commemorates the inspiring struggle of freedom by the Czech and Slovak peoples. This lecture series is sponsored by the Friends of Slovakia, the American Friends of the Czech Republic, the Embassy of Slovakia, and the Embassy of the Czech Republic, and our own History and Public Policy program and our own Global Europe program here at the Wilson Center, headed by Christian Osterman. I would like to recognize and thank the Ambassador of Slovakia to the United States, Peter Kmiec. There you go. Good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you for being with us this morning. The Ambassador of the Czech Republic to the United States, Peter Gandalovic, excuse me. Yes, good to have you here. And to welcome a few other distinguished guests, Peter Burian, the former Slovak ambassador to the United States, and currently First Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. Great to have you here, Ambassador. As well as Ted Russell, former U.S. Ambassador to Slovakia and founding chairman of the Friends of Slovakia, our first ambassador to Slovakia. Pleasure to meet you earlier. Joe Senko, the current chairman of the Friends of Slovakia, and Tom Dine, current president of the American Friends of the Czech Republic. We may also have here, or if not, will be joining us a little bit later, the ambassador of Iceland and the ambassador of Montenegro. And we have several other distinguished guests, and we're very pleased that you're all with us. And it gives me great pleasure to turn this over to Mike Van Deusen, who is an institution and a leader at the Woodrow Wilson Center, but also in the Washington policy community. Mike, great to be with you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for coming here. We appreciate it. I'm Mike Van Deusen, Senior Advisor to the President of the Wilson Center for Alumni Relations, 4,500 people that have been in this institution over 46 years. I want to welcome you. Christian Osterman is as Andrew said, the director of our Global Europe program. He could not be here this morning because he was committed a very long time ago to chair a meeting on Germany, East Germany, former East Germany, across town. He sends his regards and his regrets that he could not be here. For me, it is a pleasure to chair this lecture again and welcome you to the 15th annual Czech and Slovak lecture with Pavol Demes. The ties between this institution and Slovakia and the Czech Republic are deep and long-standing. President Wilson's strong relationship with President Tomáš Masaryk set the tone. You probably all saw the bust of Alexander Dubček prominently displayed in the hallway outside this room. The center was involved in the important effort to reestablish a statue of President Wilson near the Prague railway station. Zed David, who is sitting in this room, is from Czechoslovakia, was librarian at the center, Wilson Center, for decades, and is still a senior scholar at the center, writing about his former country's unique history. I could go on. All these links are important for the Wilson Center. Over the last 15 years, this lecture series has given the Wilson Center and the Global Europe program the privilege of hosting, among others, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, the Solidarity and prominent newspaper editor Adam Michnik, as well as the former Czech President Václav Klaus. Let me say a word about our speaker, Dr. Demes. Pavol, welcome back.
Thank you.
Dr. Demes is an alumnus of the Wilson Center. He lectured here, indeed not here, but in the castle in 1991, I believe. He was a scholar in residence here in 1999, and 2 years ago he gave an important lecture here. Dr. Demes is a well-known Slovak expert on international relations and civil society. He's an author, and as you will see shortly, an excellent photographer. He is a graduate of Charles University in Prague. Prior to the Velvet Revolution, Dr. Demes was a biomedical researcher, I believe, at Comenius University in Bratislava. After 1989, he was co-founder of the Slovak Academic Information Agency, Service Center for the Third Sector, a leading NGO in the country, and he served in the Slovak government at the Ministry of Education, and later as Minister of International Relations and Foreign Policy Advisor to the President of the Slovak Republic, Michal Kovács. From the year 2000 to 2010, he was Director for Central and East Europe of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, based in Bratislava. Now he is non-resident Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund and external advisor to the Slovak Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Demes has served on boards of a number of domestic and international nonprofit organizations. He played an important role in the EU civil society development program in Slovakia and democratization efforts in the Balkans and the Eastern Partnership countries. I want to say one person that is here with us today that we're also very happy to have with us is Ambassador Sedgwick, the United States Ambassador to Slovakia. Now, I believe, entering his 5th year in that post, and welcome. Dr. Demes, great to have you back at the Wilson Center again. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for kind words and for attending in such a large number of this Freedom Lecture, which I am going to give on this special occasion. I was thinking how to approach Freedom Lecture, because it is always given on annual basis by distinguished Czech or Slovak personality who is supposed to deliver well thought out speech which could be published. I will try to depart from this method and will rather try to do some rather free photo essay on fascinating journey my country Slovakia went through in last 25 years. Because there are 4 reasons why I decided to do this. First, audience is very unusual and special for me. My life became intertwined with almost all of you in last 25 years. Secondly, organizers are friends. And thirdly, the institution where I spent 6 months in '99 after Vladimir Mečiar left, I needed to think through my life, and I did it here and fall in love with the Balkans and other parts, which changed my life a bit, and I joined GMF right after I left this institution. And last but not least, this is year of remembering and year of reflections, since we are celebrating 25th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, but not only that, 100th anniversary of the First World War, 70th anniversary of the Slovak National Uprising against Nazis, but also 10th anniversary of EU and NATO enlargement, which played such a profound role for our country. And I'm very glad that our ambassadors, Peter Burian, Peter Kmec, are here with me, and they will double check whether I will be politically correct at the end of my speech, where I will be commenting on contemporary issues in my country. And if we could, if it would be possible to put these lights a little bit. When I was looking at our flags, I found that Slovakia and the United States love 3 colors. So color coding of the 2 countries is very similar, and story which I'm going to tell you about, it's one story. Slovakia wouldn't be as it is without the United States. So if I'm going to speak about journey of my country, it will be joint journey of Slovakia with great friend United States. But it wasn't always that way, because Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, and the United States have many things in common, because two men, Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk and Milan Rastislav Štefánik, images taken in this town, played profound role in establishing our modern state, Czechoslovakia, with enormous assistance of this gentleman who was mentioned, Woodrow Wilson. This is the statue which was unveiled in Prague in front of railway station in 2011, and Vaslov Havel was still alive at that time and attended unveiling of this ceremony alongside with Madeleine Albright and many other dignitaries. But Slovaks and Americans have many things throughout those early stages, and I think that it couldn't be depicted better than through this memorial, Iwo Jima, which everybody knows, because it's one of the most emblematic memorial from Second World War. And the leader of this unit in Mount Suribachi was Slovak, born in Czechoslovakia, Jarabina Michael Strank, who is buried at Arlington Cemetery. And what US Embassy in Bratislava found only a couple of years back, that he didn't have US citizenship when he passed away, and he was getting it posthumously through his sister in front of this memorial. And if you are in Air and Space Museum and you want to touch the moon, you touch it, because it was brought by last man on the moon, Eugene Cernan, astronaut who went on Apollo 17 on the moon and brought it here. So whenever you touch the moon, moon rock, you should know that Eugene Cernan's parents came from Slovakia. And Eugene Cernan, after Velvet Revolution, got an honorary doctorate from Comenius University, where I used to work. Now, coming closer to Velvet Revolution, this old man, Mr. Sylvester Krčméry, was used he was called General of Underground Church. Last year, when these youngsters came to congratulate him on his birthday, this is a man who was principal, together with Vladimir Jukl, in so-called candle demonstration just year before Velvet Revolution. He was jailed during communism for about 13 years and wasn't given up, and he was tortured, and in trial he said, "You have power, but I have truth." And for Slovak consciousness and for preamble to Velvet Revolution, these men played incredible role, because he, similar like Charta 77 movement, which was most known in Czech Republic and less known or less members were from Slovakia, preparation for Velvet Revolution was done mostly through underground church, through young people who were inspired by this man, Vladimir Jukl, and several others, and were ready when time came. Just before he passed away, he was decorated by President Gašparovič highest award, together with Vladimir Jukl, on 20th anniversary of Slovakia. He passed away last year. Velvet Revolution was very unusual revolution, even very term is rather strange. Revolution should be messy, bloody, but in Czechoslovakia, I think that it went well, because students and intelligentsia were mostly associated with that, and principle of nonviolence was leading all processes which went on in my country, Czechoslovakia. This is auditorium in Comenius University when students went on strike, stopped going to school, and said, enough, we don't need to go to universities unless regime will change. I was at faculty at this university then. Students pushed us, their professors, out of lectern, and we had to obey their rule, which was protesting until Communist Party will not give up. People like Sveto Bombik, student of philosophy faculty, were pushing basically the history in Slovak part of Czechoslovakia, because revolution was running parallelly in both countries. Sveťo became, for a short period, even in interim parliament. Students decided who will be their Minister of Education. There were no elections. For interim period, Public Against Violence was basically driving force, and Civic Forum in Czech Republic. But these two movements merged, and Czechoslovakia was shortly transferred. In this room, there are several people who remember Sveťo. Unfortunately, he died in car crash. Sharon Volčík, Tom Skladony, and several others with whom we met when we came here in April 1990 to seek scholarships at American universities. But the most visible face of Velvet Revolution surely was Václav Havel. This picture is from installation in Václav Havel Library in Prague. Pictures which I am showing, some of are mine, some of are from my family archive, and publication which I did on mapping Slovak-US relations. Václav Havel was similar, like Velvet Revolution, very unusual figure. Intellectual with enormous capacity to depict what we went through, what we thought about. So Václav Havel also articulated the best for an American audience what Velvet Revolution was all about and aspirations. This is from picture from first visit of Václav Havel, and with huge delegation of Czechs and Slovaks who came in February 1990 to this town where he was delivering his historical speech in Congress. Alexander Dubček, another personality, when he came to US after humiliation following 1968 invasion, where he was greeted and received honorary doctorate also from an American university here. And these are the leaders of Slovak Revolution or Velvet Revolution in Slovakia. Jan Budaj, Milan Kňažko, together with Alexander Dubček, they came to Washington in 1990. America responded in extremely fascinating way to what went on. All of you were asking then, what do you need? So many people wanted scholarships, come to the United States, but we have in the room also Ann Gardner, who started program Education for Democracy, and hundreds of American volunteers came to teach English, because at that time we thought that what we need is to learn English, to break barrier, which was created in 40 years of communist oppression. But there were people like George Soros, who luckily was not born in Argentina, but Hungary, and was fascinated to build open societies in our part of the world. And he created foundations in every single country in post-communist Europe. Or Wendy Luers, wife of former US ambassador, who mobilized attention of the United States towards Czechoslovakia. This is a picture when for the first time an American flag was raised in Bratislava at closed consulate building, which was reopened by Paul Hecker, then consul, and created bridge with Kleber Peln, who used to be there in 48 as consul, but was expelled by communists, and many of his staff even were imprisoned. So this couldn't be better symbolism that new consul with original consul, who was Senator Pell, was then chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, came, and Shirley Temple Black, then ambassador of US to Czechoslovakia, Jan Čarnogurský, and Jirka Dinsbier, our federal minister of foreign affairs. So this flag raising ceremony was in 91. And I think that this was just bridging the past with present the most unusual way. Surely, and this was my first meeting with Václav Havel when I became minister, presence of Prime Minister Čarnogurský, and at that picture I still look like scientist because I just somehow became minister as artifact because I didn't compete through any electoral process. But I was privileged enough to come with Václav Havel in 91 for an official visit, and this is when I met George Bush Sr. And for me this was rather miraculous thing, you know, that I was accompanying Václav Havel, playwright, I am biologist. Jan Langoš had still very long hair. Václav Klaus at that time was very nice man. And at that time, we stayed at Blair House, and we didn't know what black tie is, and we were forced when we went for reception to borrow ones, and when we went out, all of us, you know, one of the colleague ministers said that we look like bunch of waiters. We never seen, you know. And they even did some cartoon of me. This is Václav Havel bringing me to White House. And they tried to make fun of me in one of the Mečiar's newspapers at that time. Then, at that time, people didn't believe Czechoslovakia will split. Things went different course. Vladimír Mečiar won in Slovakia, Václav Klaus won in Czech Republic, and we knew that Czechoslovakia will split. Luckily, Czechoslovakia split very peaceful way. It was from Velvet Revolution to Velvet Divorce. So this picture depicts when US Embassy was opened in Bratislava, where Ambassador Tocečvik has his office now. So this is Milan Kňažko, Paul Hecker, and Mr. Laluha, who was Deputy Speaker of the Parliament. 10 years later, we opened embassy here. We wanted to show you that we know how to do big flags, to remember that Slovak embassy is opened in Washington. But before this happened, I need to come to a man who helped us to mature, Vladimír Mečiar. And he is with Paul Hecker because before Paul left as chargé. Vladimír Mečiar was very unusual personality who reintroduced authoritarian practices to our public life, and we needed to find a way how to tell him goodbye. And it was quite lengthy process, but I think that Slovak civil society got a lot of training through dealing with these men. Many democratic politicians got a lot of training through dealing with Vladimír Mečiar. Today, luckily, he lives happily somewhere, and we do not care very much what is he doing. He was even not attending 20th anniversary of Slovakia. This was first visit of Michal Kovács, our president, in the White House when National Holocaust Museum was open. So it was Josef Moravčík, then foreign minister, and I was accompanying president since I served as his foreign policy advisor. So Bill Clinton had special relations to Michal Kovács, who had enormously complicated relationship with Vladimír Mečiar. And as you remember, those of you who are older and follow our evolution, he even ordered kidnapping president's son and did all kinds of things which are far beyond from political culture in Central Europe. In 1994 in Prague, summit of Visegrad 4 presidents, Michal Kovács, Lech Walesa, Václav Havel, and Arpad Gönc of Hungary met. This was critical moment when Bill Clinton said that NATO could enlarge and bring in countries, former communist countries like ours. And I think that from this moment we knew that there is a road towards European and also transatlantic integration, fully open and backed by the United States. Bill Clinton would never meet Vladimír Mečiar, and he never met him, but he was meeting regularly with Václav Havel and Michal Kovács, and this picture was taken in Cedar Rapids in '95. Gail is here, director of Museum and Czech and Slovak Library and Museum and Library. And the two presidents, together with Bill Clinton, attended that opening. And this picture I call Bill Clinton in the role of hyphen between Czech and Slovak presidents. Impossible to imagine that former Yugoslav presidents would come shortly after split together to the United States, meet and talk. I see Srđan Darmanović, ambassador of Montenegro. it would be quite difficult to imagine after breakup of Yugoslavia, two presidents shortly after. I think this was critically important moment because two presidents demonstrated that split was not something which will be fueled by hatred or something similar to Balkans or former Soviet republics. So then we had to fight, and Nilda Bulen is here because we had all kinds of oppressive situation when foundations wanted to be controlled by Mečiar. This was large campaign for protecting legal situation. Wendy Lures and was with us briefly. Frank Loy came during this was first large nationwide campaign of NGOs. Later on in 98, we had this OK 98 campaign. We get out the vote, election monitoring, which changed basically situation. And we opened up catch-up period, campaigning for EU and NATO enlargement and catching up with these delays since Slovakia was expelled from integration process. Two women played crucial role in our integration process. It's Madeleine Albright, together with revolutionaries, Velvet Revolutionaries in Bratislava on 10th anniversary of Velvet Revolution, and Hillary Clinton. Doug Hengel is in the room, who was then charge in Bratislava. Hillary Clinton came in 1997 and then in 99, met with NGOs and played very important role encouraging civil society and developing ties and bonds during tough times. But then later on, since she had special spot for Slovakia, she was helping later as state secretary. Then this guy helped us to get to EU and NATO, even if he doesn't look like, Prime Minister Mikuláš Dzurinda. Mikuláš Dzurinda, for 8 years, had only one foreign minister, Eduard Kukan. Mečiar, in his 5 years, had 5 foreign ministers, because foreign ministers couldn't explain what are we up to, and were leaving and coming, and Mikuláš Dzurinda had just one, Eduard Kukan. But this picture is from New York Marathon. When 9/11 came, there was enormous outpour of solidarity. People were doing all kinds of gestures of solidarity. We are in the same boat project and many others. But Mikuláš Dzurinda in November 2001 was running New York Marathon and finished it earlier than expected, and he was not weighted with blanket by ambassador and others, and has all kinds of funny stories how he was freezing, and New York policeman was just calming him down when he was quite angry. Vince Opsitník in 2008, US ambassador, born in Slovakia. He realized his dream. He ran Košice Marathon in age 70. And he made a record. Nobody ever ran longer than him, because marathon is closed after 4.5 hours. But organizers made special arrangement until winter runs, they will keep streets clean, so he made it and became one of the heroes of the oldest marathon in Europe, Košice. George W. Bush came to Bratislava in 2005 as the only president so far. And this is Bratislava National Theatre, where he delivered speech. Many, many people came, even if the advance team was quite worried because it was in February. And at that time, it was not only meeting Slovak president and other leaders, but he met also with a man with whom somehow at that time we thought that relationships will evolve differently. Is Pavol Hrušovský, Speaker of the Parliament, George W. Bush, Ivan Gašparovič, Vladimir Putin, and Mikuláš Dzurinda. President Bush and Putin met at Bratislava Castle and discussed disarmament and cooperation between US and Russia. No one ever thought that the relationship will evolve as it evolved today between US and Russia and beyond. Barack Obama, I took this picture last year when he met in New York with civil society leaders, and Barack Obama elicited a lot of expectations and hope after George W. Bush left, but I think that many things are going differently than he expected vis-à-vis Central Eastern Europe, vis-à-vis Russia. And I was among those who signed 5 years ago a letter to Barack Obama, together with Martin Butora, Michal Kovács, Václav Havel, Sasha Vondra, and others, where we tried to tell President Obama that this reset policy with Russia should be probably done slightly differently. And this is our current Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who after long try met finally Barack Obama. And I think that this is going to be too political. That is why I will skip this relationship. I may answer some in discussion. And this one is our new president, Andrej Kiska, who was elected this year, and Todd Sedgwick, who is here, US ambassador. It was at his 4th of July party. Andrej Kiska is a rather unusual political leader who came after '89, stayed in the United States, worked here a bit to learn about new regime, which he wanted to introduce also at home. He became successful businessman, philanthropist, and in very surprising election campaign won this year and is our president. What is fascinating that this year he came, was accompanied by ambassadors, that he brought a bunch of startup people and young Slovak entrepreneurs alongside showing nature of the relationship, how it is changing. And I think that our embassy is doing excellent job in showing new phase of relationship. And as they created the new slogan that from iron to silicon, from US steel to startups, I think that this is like opening of new phase. Maroš Šefčovič is our commissioner in European Commission. Slovakia is now for 10 years in EU, and this guy is in charge of energy in European Union. One can hardly expect tougher portfolio. Maroš is vice president of European Commission and also in charge of Energy Union. I think it is quite surprising. Originally, he got portfolio transport and cosmic research, and I'm quite unhappy that we lost this cosmic research. Slovaks are quite good at this, but now he got this energy. Angela Merkel got honorary doctorate just a few weeks ago in Bratislava at Comenius University. This is the place where our Velvet Revolution started, alongside with Umelecká beseda, just close to it. And today, 25 years after, Angela Merkel came and got honorary doctorate and was speaking about Europe, where Slovakia is part of, was speaking about Ukraine, which is our neighbor and tough neighbor, and spoke also about humanity and the role of education, the role of academia. It was quite fascinating to listen to her on this occasion. You probably know this thing. This was unveiled in May in Prague at Maltese Square, but you have something like this at Georgetown, because Peter Gandalovic got this idea that Václav Havel needs to have something which represents him. This is, Václav Havel wouldn't look good at horse, or wouldn't look as big statue in gesture. And his friends knew that what made Václav Havel special was that he was able to talk to people of various faith, various political affiliation. And his friend artist created these 2 chairs, which are put together with this little round table, and in the middle is a linden tree, which is a tree of all Slavs, Czechs included. And here you have little hearts that Václav Havel used to add to his signature. And I think that Velvet Revolution is about legacy, is about this. Let's sit down and let's talk, even if we have some complicated issues. And I think that this is what I am keeping and cherishing from those days, and this is legacy, which couldn't be better depicted as the artist did. And with this, I would like to tell you that in conclusion, that my personal feeling 25 years after Velvet Revolution are that I'm very grateful that I live in a country called Slovakia. I think that when Pope John Paul II in 97 said that Slovakia has a special role in Europe of 21st century, I thought that he's exaggerating. The more I'm thinking about it, seeing all this search for truth and dignity and all kinds of tensions, but always done in velvet way, figuring out how to keep politicians accountable, how to keep church leaders better than they are, how to keep public life cleaner, how to fight against corruption, how to help disadvantaged people, how to help Roma. There are many things where we are still struggling and trying our best. But I think that since Pope was beatified, I think that saints probably can't get it wrong. So I believe that Slovakia, in spite of all kinds of ups and downs, will do its best to be a good member of European family. And the United States, which was part of that story, as you saw, I think will remain our friend, partner, and ally. Thank you very much.
Pavol, that was marvelous. Maybe that's right, the lights. The floor is open. We have several minutes, and we would love to hear from any of you. No speeches, some questions. Identify yourself, and there are microphones that will be given to you. Just raise your hand, and we'll get one to you. The gentleman here.
Thank you. I'm Julian Josephson with Bootstrap Press of Bethesda, Maryland. One question. The communist regimes left quite a bit of environmental problems, some of them pretty bad in all the occupied countries. I'm sure Slovakia was also so affected. Could you mention some of the efforts made over the last 25 years since the Velvet Revolution to counter some of those problems?
Mm-hmm. Should I answer right now, or we are collecting?
Right now,
okay.
right now. And in a minute, if there are a lot of hands,
Okay,
I'll
fine.
take 2 or 3 questions.
I think that environment or environmental activists before Velvet Revolution play a key role in dissident movements because we couldn't speak freely about environmental damage. And after Velvet Revolution, many things opened up. And I think that here I would say that we did quite good job, both in Czech Republic and in Slovakia. And nowadays, since we are members of European Union, also we need to comply not only with our own standards, but with standards of European Union. Surely there are many things which are still complicated because they are sort of expensive solutions, but I think that environment protection is something where I wouldn't complain that if I compare it with other sectors of society.
I just might add to that when the changes occurred throughout Central Europe, I remember somebody in the World Bank who was a water specialist saying that their studies in Poland indicated that 95% of the surface water in the streams near Krakow were unfit for industrial use. We're not talking about human use. And 20 years later, it's remarkable how things have changed. Further questions? Tom, front row.
Thank you, Pavol, for such a fascinating trip through the recent past. To follow on the last question, what is the Slovak relationship with Russia today? As you know, here in Washington, Putin pollutes our foreign policy considerations, and yet we've heard some utterances from not only Bratislava, but from Prague and a few other such capitals that are more sympathetic to Russia than the Americans are at their time.
I think if if I would be asked what's the biggest challenge for foreign policy of Europe today, I would without any hesitation say that Russia, because if we are speaking about anniversaries, and I said that 100th anniversary of First World War, 70 national uprising and so on, I would add to this row of anniversaries also 0 anniversary called annexation of Crimea and opening of Russia-West confrontation. I think that today we are over with this search for partnership. I don't think that the relationship between EU, US, and Russia could be called partnership. This is wishful thinking, but it is not. It is confrontation by now. And Slovakia is part of European Union when it comes to sanction policies, which we introduced. And it's very complicated for us because we are fully dependent on energy, on Russia. Ukraine is our neighbor, and nervousness in Slovakia today is very high. And also it's test both for political leaders but also for population, how we are going to interpret what's going on in Russia. And also Visegrad Group you have now tested because Poland has slightly different attitude to what's going on there than the rest of us. But I think that and Václav Klaus would surely have different attitudes towards Russia than Václav Havel. And Robert Fico has different attitudes towards Russia a bit, probably, or sanctions than our president. So you are having all kinds of lines where particularly our foreign ministry needs to figure out and balance since we are members of EU and NATO. So I think that, and for example, a person like Jan Čarnogursky, who is former dissident and prime minister in whose government I served. Today he thinks that Vladimir Putin is excellent politician, very successful, and so on. Last but not least, I think that we underestimated processes in Russia. And if you remember, Václav Havel in his speech, February 1990, when he mentioned that I'm often asked, how should we help? Americans were asking this question. He said, you don't need to help us, help Soviet Union. This is very strong line in his speech, and I think that if we look where we are now, 25 years after, we are in rather complicated, I would say even dangerous period, and we need to figure out collectively how to handle this situation. This is not a task for Slovakia to figure out, even if we have a lot of very skilled diplomats. I mean, our foreign minister Lajčák is senior diplomat now. Maroš Šefčovič, as I said, vice president. And we have several very good diplomats, but I think that today Russia is single most important challenge while we are commemorating 25th anniversary of fall of Berlin Wall, Velvet Revolution, and other revolutions in the region.
The lady here in the front row. Oh, you want to ask?
Thank you. I'm Nilda Bulain. I'm working here currently with the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law in DC, but I'm originally Hungarian, and we used to work together for a couple of decades on developing civil society in the region. And I was struck by your comment at the end when you said that you were proud of living in Slovakia, because it's something that many Hungarians, many of us, would not necessarily say of our own country right now. And I wanted to ask you to reflect on the situation of civil society in the region and why you see that it's not organizing in Hungary the way one would think, after 25 years of freedom and democracy, one would expect that there would be more of what you said about Mecsár and the civil society being trained and eventually having him go. And how do you see that situation today?
Yeah, I think that after changes, Hungary was leading country when it comes to civil society development, because you started, there are many things we came and sort of looked at how you did it and so on. I think that how Hungary evolved, it's big surprise for many from the point of view of civic freedoms and pluralism and so on. Today, civil society in Slovakia, I think, is just part of our fabric of society. And whenever there are tough times, civil society is getting activated and is stepping out. Just yesterday, we released, leading NGOs released a petition to support Ukraine in very practical terms and steps. I mean, we NGOs and civil societies on leading edge to fight corruption in country and so on and so on. We are not silenced. And I think that today what is rather surprising on 25th anniversary, that journalists are turning into activists, which is quite interesting, because from SME Daily, when one investor who doesn't have very good track record bought part of this publishing house, 64 journalists said goodbye. I think that this is rather remarkable, and are starting now N project, completely new internet. Several journalists are now learning how to do investigative journalism, which in your country is impossible to see. So I think that in Slovakia we have space for civil society, democratic action, and I believe that we are in a situation that even if power holders, and some of them today are in sort of targeted by civil society, they have to withstand that they are not going to reign in country the way as they wish, but they need to obey rule of law, and we are just rules-based society. And one interesting case which occurred is that how businesses are getting active in public arena. For the first time in last year or two, businesses are putting money in even into, or are creating joint ventures with NGOs which are fighting against corruption. Traditionally, businesses like to be behind the scene and not to go into this radioactive stuff, because being afraid that government will then to do something to them. I think that this is gone. And again, unthinkable, President Kiska, he didn't have any political past. He was NGO guy. He won elections by 20%, competing with the most powerful politician in country, Robert Fico. And it just tells you that population is having all kinds of built-in civic reflexes to be active. Surely it could be more active always, but in comparison with your country, I think that this is very, very different situation what we have.
Slovak TV.
Slovak Public Television, Alena Taranova. I would like to have a follow-up for the first question. 25 years ago, Slovakia got a lot of attention and support, not only from the United States, but also from our neighboring countries. Nowadays, the situation is like Ukraine gets a very negative. Our Prime Minister Robert Fico and the Czech President Miloš Zeman, they rather speak very negatively about our neighbor, Ukraine. And I would like to ask you, do you understand that? And the other part of the question is, do you think that there is still a big danger that Slovakia would lean back under the influence of Russia?
Mm-hmm. As you see, Slovak TV is asking tough questions. I think that, Miloš Zeman is not Vaslov Havel, for sure. I think his latest comments in Hovory Zlán, I think, created such an outpour of reactions that I think Miloš Zeman will have tough times now to continue to be president. I don't want to say that I'm worried. He's not my president, but I think that Czech people are a little bit uneasy with some of his vocabulary. They are a bit uneasy also with his position vis-à-vis Russia. Robert Fico, and Miloš Zeman, I think, are having sense for people's worries, and probably they think that they will get sympathy if they will articulate some issues related to position of EU towards Russia. But I think they are not doing good service to our peoples, because we are fed with conspiracy theories now, and propaganda machinery by Russia is highly effective, much more effective than US public diplomacy. Sorry to say that. And I think that today, when Ukraine is testing point for not only for Ukraine-Russia relations, but I think that Vladimir Putin entered into competition, we'll use rather mild word for the time being, with EU and NATO, and US is arch enemy in Vladimir Putin's thinking about international relations and future. If you read his, or you can watch it on YouTube in English, his Valdai speech, it is almost exclusively dedicated to the United States. And I think that Ukraine, its stability and predictability of this country is of utmost importance for stability of whole European continent. And I think that under these circumstances, if some politicians, either in Czech Republic or Slovakia, Miloš Zeman or Robert Fico included, are not getting clear position on this similar to other allies within European Union, I think that they are contributing to erosion of Europe, not only of sort of relationships between bilateral and so on. I think that all of these new trends and development is just showing completely new phase of international relations. And in conclusion, I think that, as I mentioned, Slovak NGOs, but majority of politicians and our foreign ministry and Czech foreign ministry, even Hungarian foreign ministry in this matter, I think are coming closer and closer to European mainstream and not are taking it on light way and playing some domestic politics. You can't play domestic politics on this very tough and complicated issue for Europe and transatlantic family.
Let us all thank Dr. Demes for his wonderful lecture. I would like to ask here at the end that Ted Russell and Tom Dine and Mr. Senko come on up, and they want to make a brief announcement.
Pavol, that was a innovative freedom lecture, because it was the first, I think, photo essay that we have had in this entire series. I think it was enormously effective. I think you have given us a wonderful view of how Slovakia moved to be a normal, democratic, European country and friend of the United States, and you have played an enormous personal role in the development of Slovak civil society. I loved your reference to Mr. Mečar, with whom we dealt together when I was there in Bratislava, as a kind of a sparring partner to prepare a civil society. I think that's a wonderful image that we can all cherish. But I also thank you for your letter that you wrote to us about paying attention to Central Europe. I hope we do pay attention to the points that you and Vaslov Havel and others raised in that letter. And I think your series of lectures here helps to drive home that point. So thank you for a wonderful presentation. You have already received our Medal of Honor, so we couldn't give it to you again, as we do to most freedom lectures. So we will give you something that weighs even more, is even more cumbersome for your airplane luggage, but we hope it will be a good souvenir of this time. So thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Pavol and I go back to the early days of the Clinton administration, And you were the first civil society activist to come into my USAID office. And you were also the first person not to hold a can out for me to put money into it. So I've been one of your admirers over the years, and you've done great stuff. Also, to tell a more personal story, my wife and I were election observers in the third election of 2004 in Ukraine, and the third election was the final one in December to put the stamp of the Orange Revolution on Ukraine. And in the midst of maybe 1 million people, we bumped into each other. And that's when I found out that Pavol and his cohorts from Slovakia had been training Ukrainian civil society activists to get ready for this great event. So I commend you. You've given a wonderful name to democracy. Most people just focus on free and fair elections, hopefully free and hopefully fair. Most people talk about rule of law and an independent judiciary. Others will talk about a free media and for sure freedom of expression. And then there's honesty and accountability, as you mentioned in your talk. But really, democracy must have civil society. And civil society really makes democracy, I believe. And so you are at the forefront of this great moment. And during our lifetimes, so I consider you a hero. And on behalf of the American friends of the Czech Republic, we're not going to weigh you down with stuff to take on the airplane. Actually, this pin, this Czech American Friends of the Czech Republic pin weighs more than what's in the envelope, but hopefully the envelope will pay for your luggage. And secondly, Ted Russell and I, we do these things once a year and we like to do them together. This is a certificate of appreciation awarded to Pavol Demes in grateful appreciation for the promotion of understanding of the Czech and Slovak legacy in the struggle for freedom, overcoming 50 years of foreign domination and emerging as free, secure, and democratic nations. Czech and Slovak Freedom Lecture Series. I have signed it, and Ted has signed it. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. You're welcome at the Wilson Center anytime, and I hope you'll come back. And thank you, Tom and Ted and Joe and Phil for that presentation. And a special thanks, Dr. Demes.
Thank you, Mike.
Good to see you.